I experience my parent as unavailable. So I'm going to be attracted to somebody who is not available. Relationships start off with romance, they go into power struggle, but the goal is to create what we call the conscious marriage.
How much of your childhood affects your adult life?
We can't not be affected by our past. The challenge that people have in relationship is we have, I would say, like relational anxiety. We can't expect anyone else to change. The only thing we can do is to become a better partner. Think about how your spouse may remind you of your parents. You'll begin to see that, oh yes, there is a good reason why I picked them.
What is imago therapy?
So Imago therapy is a modality of couples therapy. Relationships are supposed to have challenges, and that the challenges are for the purpose of growth and healing.
So you're saying now that I unconsciously chose my spouse?
Hi, if you are at the verge of losing your marriage or are just generally feeling stuck in your relationship, this episode is for you. My guest today, Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin, is a certified relationship therapist that has positively impacted the relationship of over 1 million people. What fascinates me the most about his approach is he's not telling you not to have conflict, but he's teaching you how to use these conflicts to your advantage. Rabbi Slatkin is a certified Imago therapist. What that means is that he focuses on the root cause of the problem. He delves into how your childhood can affect the quality of your relationships. So what you think is your fault might not necessarily be your fault, and you don't even know. So just before you give up on that relationship that used to make you happy, giggle, and even give you butterflies once upon a time, you might want to watch this episode till the end, as this might just be the beginning of what saves that relationship. Let's dive in. Hi guys, so before we get into the episode, I have a little huge favor to ask of you. Over the years, I've learned that closed mouths don't get fed. So this is me opening my mouth with the hopes that you'll feed me to stupor. If you as little as enjoyed this show, please like, share, and subscribe. It gives me the extra motivation that I need to keep going because I really want to be doing this for a very, very long time. Okay, thank you. Let's get back to the show.
Hi, Rabbi Slatkin.
Hi, Mory, how are you? Thank you for having me on your show
Thank,
today.
thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah.
Uh,
So, but why do you do what you do?
Why do I do what I do?
Yeah.
Well, I believe in help. I've always liked helping people. I've always like felt that since I was a little child, like I wanted to make a difference in the world. But I would say specifically that my wife and I were experiencing challenges in the beginning of our relationship. About 2 years in, when we had our first child, my wife's parents were divorced, and so that was really hard for her growing up as a girl, and she didn't want to repeat that in her own relationship. But then when we started having problems, it became very challenging for both of us. So we got help, and we made it our mission that we want to help other couples be able to get the same type of help. And because there's so many people that are needlessly breaking up marriages and ruining families, when we believe that there's a better way out there, a better way to help heal, to not blame each other, but to really look at the challenges as an opportunity for growth and healing. So we saw the impact it had on us, and we wanted to share that with the world.
Hmm. So is it possible to use your challenges as opportunities?
Yes, for sure. We believe that marriage is really for the purpose of growth and healing, so that we're actually going to attract somebody who is going to trigger us, particularly our childhood challenges. So that's actually really the purpose of the relationship. And it's not just an exception to the rule, but it's what we see. I would say like time and time again with the couples that we work with, that their challenges that are coming up in their relationship are really their own issues that they need to work through from their childhood, and that the marriage is an opportunity to actually address it in a more effective way and to create healing together.
Okay, so if a person is having challenges in their relationship, for instance, what would be the first step to, solving the such problems?
Well, the first step is to be aware of it and to understand where it's coming from, because people tend to blame the other person for their problems. So I'm not happy. You're doing this to me. It's your fault. So learning how to get self-aware and realize, well, why does it bother me so much when my spouse, doesn't pay me attention or when they talk to me a certain way? Why do I react so strongly to that? Why do I have such a disproportional response? And we say if it's hysterical, it's historical. If something really bothers us, it's from something deeper. So by getting that awareness and understanding that, it helps us be able to control how we react and respond to our spouse. It helps us take ownership for our role and why we're reacting, and it helps our spouse understand us and have more compassion. Because, if you're just complaining to your spouse about how bad they are, well, they're probably going to get defensive and they're not going to be able to really change and help us. But if they can understand where it's coming from and why it bothers us, and how it's more about us than them, then they no longer need to feel defensive. Instead, they actually can feel compassion and curiosity and can want to actually help us work together and not push our buttons.
Mm. So how do you identify these triggers? Because I feel like a lot of times people don't even know that they have these triggers. Like if my spouse wasn't paying me attention, for instance, I'm not thinking, oh, this is a childhood problem. I'm thinking, oh, this is a him problem, right? Because I'm sure there used to be a time in the relationship where he used to pay me all the attention, right? So what is going on now? So if my spouse, to simplify the question for you now, if my spouse wasn't paying me attention in the relationship, how do I go about it? So do I just keep quiet because, or I don't want to cause any troubles, or
You're wondering, like, what do you do if you have a frustration in the relationship? You just like don't say anything and keep quiet just to keep the peace, or do you actually address it with them?
yes.
So what we teach couple, it depends on, there's two different things. It's like, what do you do on your own, and what do you do if we actually were able to help you as a couple? So when we have a couple come into the office and we work with them, or what we teach couples in our online program is to be able to learn how to talk to your spouse about what bothers you, but learn how to say it in a different way. So for example, typical someone spouse who's upset about something, they might say, "Look, you don't pay attention to me, you don't care about me, you don't love me." Know, well, that's going to probably get them defensive. They may not agree with that, or they might just feel like you're nagging them, complaining. They don't want to hear that. But if you could have a safe conversation with them and invite them for a dialogue and say, I'd like to talk to you about something that's bothering me. Are you available? And then sharing with them, I feel sometimes that you don't pay attention to me. I feel like you ignore me. And then have them listen without responding and just reflecting back and continue to share. And then ask yourself, why does it bother me so much? Again, there's things that bother everyone. Nobody wants to be ignored. But I feel super ignored, where I'm just livid because of it. I'm so angry. I'm so sad. I have a very intense response. Then there's probably, yes, there's what 10%, yes, your spouse might not be giving you a lot of attention, but why it bothers you so much is probably your own thing. Because I felt ignored growing up. So when you share your frustration with your spouse without blaming them, but sharing what you're feeling, and then thinking about, well, what this reminds me of and what's familiar about this is that, as a little child, I also didn't really feel like I got the attention I wanted. And so when you don't pay attention to me, it makes me feel even worse. When you say it like that, that's a much more effective way to do it. You're not blaming the other person, you're not putting them on the defensive. You're sharing your feelings and you're taking ownership for where it's coming from. Now, sometimes people might say, I don't remember, I don't know what the connection is. So you might not have a connection, but I invite people to think about it. As I said, if it's hysterical, it's historical. If it's any issue that really bothers you so much, it's probably something familiar and it's worth taking a look at and asking yourself, is this familiar? Does this come from anywhere?
Yeah, before we go further, for people who don't know what it is, what is imago therapy?
So Imago therapy is a modality of couples therapy. It's a type of couples therapy that was created in the early 80s by Dr. Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt. And basically, Harville was a teacher. He was teaching couples therapy to students, and he was also doing couples therapy and getting a divorce at the same time. And he said, I feel a little bit like a fraud. Here I am, I'm teaching people how to be a good therapist. I'm teaching couples how to heal their relationship, but I don't even know how to do it myself. So he made it his mission to understand, why does the nightmare why does the dream become the nightmare? Why does the dream of romantic love that relationships start off with quickly turn into the nightmare of the power struggle? And he came up with a whole theory that that there's a reason why we choose our spouse. It's not random. It's that we are looking for our imago. We are looking for this image that we have. We all have this unconscious image of the person we want to marry, and that's who we're attracted to. And that explains why we marry our spouse over anyone else. And that unconscious image is really a composite of the positive and negative characteristics of our parents. So we're basically looking to try, we're unconsciously, of course, attracted to someone who's going to remind us of our childhood so that we can get it right. Because marriage is the unfinished business of childhood, and it's for the purpose of growth and healing. So that is the main kind of theory. There's a lot more to it, of course, but that's the main idea. And that relationships start off with romance. They go into power struggle, but the goal is to create what we call the conscious marriage. And if we can become conscious of why things bother us, we can get out of the power struggle and be able to work together. Another hallmark of it is that we have a very emphasis on safety and creating a safe process of dialogue where couples can be able to share their feelings with each other and create a safe space so that they can show up as their best selves.
Mm. So you're saying now that I unconsciously chose my spouse?
That's what the theory asserts. So, meaning there's conscious reasons too. You probably could tell me, well, he was a nice guy. He looked nice. He had a good personality. You have very good reasons consciously, but there's also some other reasons, at least according to the Imago theory, why you picked your spouse. And if you understand, think about how your spouse may remind you of your parents, the good and the bad. You'll begin to see that, oh yes, there is a good reason why I picked them.
Can you give specific examples though?
So for example, let's say I was uh, let's say that I experienced my parent as critical. So I'm going to unconsciously look for someone who tends to be critical. Or I experience my parent as unavailable. So I'm going to be attracted to somebody who is not available. And it's counterintuitive because who in their right mind would want to do that? That's because it's not coming from your right mind. It's coming from your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind wants to heal that. I want to be able to finally get the love that I didn't get growing up, to get the attention I didn't get, to find somebody who could not judge me. But I have to attract somebody who will be like that. And if I can become conscious of why it bothers me, not only it won't bother me as much, I won't react as strongly, and my spouse will have more compassion and meet that need. So, for example, if I complain to my wife all the time, you're never available for me, you're never there for me, you don't pay me any attention. Well, as I said before, she's probably going to get defensive. She'll say maybe she does, or she's not going to want to spend attention because she feels like I'm just bothering her. But if she can understand my childhood, when I was a little boy and I used to like wait for my parents to come home and nobody came home because they were working late and I was always lonely. And if she hears that story, it's like, wow, I really feel bad for that little child, that little boy. And I want to give you attention and I want to make an extra effort to meet your need. So when you hear the story, you feel compassion. When you feel criticized and blamed for not meeting your partner's need, you feel defensive and you don't make the effort to meet it. So that's a kind of how it works and why it's so powerful. Because, for example, if I married someone who felt familiar, they're not giving me attention, and then they wind up giving me attention. It's very healing. It's like my parent giving me the attention I didn't get. Now it's your spouse who's your closest adult human relationship you can have.
Right. Okay. Well, that I think the last part really brought it home for me. So does that heal you in any way?
Does
If
it
you
heal
think
you?
yeah, is it healing in any way, or it's just like it's strictly for pleasure, or does it heal the broken child in you?
We believe that it does heal. It does help to heal. That the adult relationship is really where the healing takes place. That if you can experience somebody who feels familiar to the person who triggered you, but they can actually meet that childhood need, then you can experience that healing because you can have a safe relationship. So let's just to say it in other words, the challenge that people have in relationship is we have, I would say, like relational anxiety. So a parent does the best job they can. I don't think any parent deliberately wants to hurt their child, but everybody has their own stressors. They have their own with their spouse, with their life, with their work, a lot going on in life. They can't always meet their child's needs. They don't even know what their child's needs are because their child can't necessarily articulate it, especially as a young child. And sometimes parents are available for their child and sometimes they're not. And sometimes they're maybe too available and they smother the child. So it creates what we call like the anxious brain. And the brain, but because the brain did not have that, because of the unattuned parenting, the brain becomes anxious and relationships are anxious. And the only way to really heal that is in relationship, to be able to have be in a safe relationship with an other. And when you can fully feel safe, you can kind of co-regulate your brain so that the anxiety is no longer there. So that's why the adult relationship, why marriage can be healing, because if your partner can give you what you need, if your partner can be safe, if your partner can be there for you and be present for you in the way that your parents weren't, then that can actually heal and repair your brain so that you can repair that childhood experience.
Mm. Should you put that amount of work on your partner, though? Should you put that amount of responsibility on your partner? Is it fair on them?
Like, is it fair to say, like, okay, you have to heal my childhood?
Yeah, because that seems like a lot of responsibility to put on just one person's shoulder. It's like, well, my childhood was bad, so you have to heal it.
Right. So
Like
I
that could
that
that could cause more conflict. I don't know.
yeah, so that's a sentiment that some people express. It's like, okay, so is it really fair to expect that my spouse has to heal my childhood? And the truth is really, we can't expect anyone else to change. We can't expect anyone else to give us anything, even our spouse. The only thing we can do is to become a better partner. But the idea is that if we can become a better partner and work on ourselves to be more aware, and to treat our spouse differently and not trigger them, then they will probably respond in kind. So you're not doing it with an agenda, but that usually happens if somebody, like if you stop pushing someone's buttons, they're going to stop reacting and pushing your buttons. So part of it is if your spouse is willing to do the work with you, then that's great, and you can share with them your challenges, they share with you their challenges, and you can work together. But to expect, I can't expect it. I have to realize also I have a childhood need of feeling um, attention because I didn't get it growing up. Well, first of all, that's my perception. It's all about perception because my parent might have thought they gave me a lot of attention, but for some reason it wasn't enough for me. And my brother might feel like he got lots of attention. So, it's all about the way it's my reality was this. And then because that's my reality, that's how I see everything else. What we're trying to do is the more I can be aware of that, I can realize, okay, this is just like an idea that I have in my head. This is my experience. It may or may not be true, but that's how I experienced it as a child. And this is what I'm experiencing in the relationship. I can choose to respond as an adult now. When I'm not conscious, so when I'm not unconscious and my spouse doesn't pay attention to me, I feel like a little boy again and I just react like I did as a child. And that's where the bad behavior happens because I don't feel safe. But if I can be aware of where it's coming from, if I can be conscious, then I can choose and say, you know what? I know my wife is like not giving me any time today, but maybe it's just because she's busy. Maybe she just, it's not that she doesn't love me or doesn't want to spend time with me. Maybe she has something else going on. Whereas before, and maybe it's just because I'm extra sensitive because this is my childhood issue. So I need to take ownership for it. It's not just like, okay, she needs to give me unlimited attention because I didn't get it growing up. No, I also have to take ownership for it. I can't expect her to change. I need to take ownership and to realize this is my childhood experience. I'm overreacting, not to judge ourselves, but I'm reacting disproportionately because it's my own issue. I need to take ownership for that it is my issue. And maybe I need to stop doing things that maybe I'm pushing her away. Sometimes in order to get our needs met, we actually do the opposite and we push the other person away. So maybe I'm actually discouraging her from spending, I want her to spend time with me, but I'm discouraging her because I'm nagging her all the time or complaining all the time. So, maybe there are things I need to do. So as an adult, if I can be conscious, I can react differently. As opposed to if I'm not conscious and I don't realize where it's coming from, I'm just going to I'm just going to act out like a child. So yes, we cannot expect our spouse to do all the work. We need to take ownership for ourselves. But when we do that and we change, it will make it more easy for our spouse to meet our needs if they so choose to.
Yeah. What is the first stage of being conscious?
I mean, the first stage of being conscious is just taking a moment and asking yourself that question. The things that thinking about the things that trigger me about my partner, the things that bother me most, the things that provoke the strongest reaction, and just asking myself, is this familiar? Have I felt this before in my life? Where is this coming from? And that would be the first step, just to ask yourself those questions and to sit with that and to see. And again, not to judge it, not to worry that you're judging your parents. Your parents did the best job possible. Just to see, is this familiar to me? Is this a familiar experience I've had in my life? That would be the first step.
Okay. Are there any cases where the reverse is actually the case? Where it is like, so if you had an unavailable parent, you're looking for a spouse that is always available. Do we have cases where that is the case?
Yeah, so you're wondering if we had if we had someone unavailable, are we going to look for someone that's always available? Yeah,
Yes.
well, the truth is that's what we're going to want. I mean, consciously we're going to want that. So if you ask me what type of if I know about my childhood, you might ask me what type of spouse am I looking for? I might say, yeah, I want someone who can give me attention. And when I go and in the romantic stage, I'm actually going to feel like they are giving me attention, because that's the trick to get in the door. During the romantic stage, you see all the things that you want to in your spouse, all the wonderful things. You see them for what they can be in the future, the potential that they can heal you, that they can give you what they need. And that's why it's so enticing. Problem is we have, because of the romantic stage, it's like we're on drugs. So part of our brain, the pain receptors and all those negative things are dulled so that we're not able to see who they truly are. And not even that, we show up as our best selves. When someone's in love, they can lift a car up. They can do things they can show up as their best selves. But once the romance wears away, and the power struggle ensues, people go back to their default. So even though I thought my spouse was somebody who would give me attention, they actually turned out to be someone who has a hard time giving me attention. The reason is that they have their own childhood story. Because, sometimes like maybe they were forced to like sit and listen to their parent lecture for hours on end. So that made them not want to sit for more than a few minutes. So when someone starts talking, they're just like, get me out of here. So you can see that people usually marry. The thing I need most from my spouse is the hardest for them to give, and vice versa. So the thing I need to heal my childhood is going to be the hardest thing for my wife to give, but that's the very thing she needs to grow because that's a part of herself that she cut off in childhood because of her own childhood story. So you see that people have kind of almost the opposite story. So in the romantic stage, it will appear that they're able to do that thing because that's the part that they kind of cut off. But in the romantic stage, they can be their best self. But when the power struggle ensues, they go back to their default. And that's usually the thing that's going to push the other person's button. So yes, we are looking for what we want and what we didn't get, but we wind up unconsciously attracting someone who really can't give it to us.
Interesting. So you're saying now that a lot of misunderstandings that we have in relationships aren't necessarily what we think they are. Like there's usually a deeper cause, right?
Yeah, there's usually something deeper. I mean, look, it could be something like, if it's just not, if not a big deal, if you're not reacting that much, and maybe it's just something silly. But if anything bothers you, even something that could be something like how you fold the laundry or don't fold the laundry, that can actually be, I've seen that go back to childhood issues. So you'll be surprised how deep it can go. And what's refreshing about this is that once you see how deep it can go, you can get out of that power struggle. I remember when my wife and I first I did our first session together in Imago, and we were talking about a closet rod in my baby's closet that I didn't fix. And we just thought that's a silly little thing, right? But it went back to something very deep about my wife not feeling that anybody would take care of her or support her, that she had to do everything herself. And once I understood that, I was able to hear where she was coming from and have compassion for her. And she was also able to figure out a way to deal with the problem once she realized it was not about the closet rod, it was about something deeper. So it's really powerful once you can can figure out that there's something more there than just a little bickering? Because otherwise, the couples just get stuck in the power struggle. They're just fighting about this thing and that thing, and they never get out of it. But once they become conscious, they don't have to be stuck in that battle anymore.
That makes sense. That makes absolute sense. Your marriage was at the brink of failure.
Yeah, I mean, it would have gotten there for sure. I mean, it was, and we were only 2 years in, but it was like getting to the point where we were not happy and we were fighting, and
Were
we
you going
just,
to file for divorce?
no, I mean, we didn't have, it's not like we called a lawyer or anything like that. We didn't get to that point, but we definitely like, if I'm the type of person that's like, never going to leave. So I'm going to fight for it no matter what. Um, my wife saw growing up that, one of her parents just ran away. That was it. So, she's not used to seeing people stick it out, and she's not used to seeing challenges that you can get through them. So that was hard for us in the beginning. So no, we didn't have like we weren't calling attorneys, but I can imagine if we did not get help and it would continue the way it would have gotten to the point where it would have been difficult to stay together.
Makes sense, which is kind of like the case with me and my husband. He saw his parents stick it out, right? They've been together for many years.
Yeah,
And so he has the mentality of for life.
right,
And I, on the other hand, so my dad had to travel abroad for greener pastures, and that was the end of that relationship with my parents, right? So whenever like a fight comes up, I'm like, okay, yeah, you're just about like, I'm like, okay, you're about to go. Yeah, fine. That's how everybody just leaves, right?
right.
Because my dad left, and so I'm just like everybody just leaves. So he's like, and then he's always like, this nobody's leaving, this is an argument that we're going to have and fix, but I'm just always, oh, you're about to leave, oh, you're about to leave. I think I've gotten better though, but in the initial stage, I think we also had to we had that issue. But how did you deal, what was your first step in getting help?
Well, it's interesting. We always say there's a dragger and a draggy. There's one person who wants to do it and one person who doesn't. You have to drag them. So I was I had a colleague of mine who told me about Imago. I heard about Imago before, but they told me we went to Imago. It was great. You should, have this particular therapist I recommend. And my wife was going to her hairdresser, and she also told her about Imago. So my wife kind of thought, okay, if I said it, maybe not, but if the hairdresser said it, then okay, maybe this is a sign we need to do it. So I kind of said, like, we need to do something. Like, this is just not working. So I kind of dragged her, and after the first session, we were, we saw the hope again. We saw the light at the end of the tunnel. We saw like now all of this pain, like we see like there's something else going on. And we kept going until we stabilized and got to a place where things were much better and we felt reconnected and we had the tools. So that's how we got to that place. And we had our ups and downs. Like, we had I don't call it like a midlife, I don't know if I call it a midlife crisis, but we had like we have a few, especially one rough patch where it was going in a pretty bad direction. But because at least for me, as the one who's I don't want to say the more committed one, because of what I saw growing up and just my personality, and because of this work, I just I was able to tell myself, okay, don't. It's very because it's very easy in this time. You start thinking, okay, well, like you're the problem. You're the one who's messed up, right? That's how we tend to think about our partner when they're not nice to us. And I was able to kind of remember that all the principles that we learned about the childhood and that why people react and when people have their challenges and they're being triggered and all those type of things, and that at this moment I need to carry the relationship to
Hmm.
help us get through this kind of crisis until we can, knock some sense into each other. And that's what we did. And we came out stronger afterwards. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, it might have been even harder than the beginning. The beginning was hard, but I think this was even harder and scarier, at least for me. But because of the work we did, it was a lot easier for me to know that to not second guess, because it's very easy to second guess. We can say, I'm just in the wrong relationship. This person is just too difficult. But because of the work we did, it helped me reinforce the belief that, okay, this is normal. It's difficult. We just have to get through this.
You've spoken about the 5 stages to save your marriage.
Yes.
Can we just briefly summarize those stages?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's something that I kind of came up with over the years and working with couples. What I've seen was the most kind of successful way to help couples work on their relationship. In my book, The Five-Step Action Plan to Happy Marriage, and we have an online course with it. So we start off with number one is commitment. That couples that are committed can get through anything. If you're committed, I got to make this work. Even if it's difficult, I'll make it work. If you're not committed, even the little silliest petty things can throw a couple off and just check you out. So really being all in is the first successful ingredient.
Both parties have to want it.
Yeah, ultimately both parties have to want it because it's going to be if one person has one foot out the door, it's going to be hard to save. But look, you can still improve things even on your own, but it's a lot harder when the other person's not so committed. The second step is close your exits, seal your exits. So once you're committed, then you have to make sure that all the energy leaks are no longer there, which means that when we don't feel safe in a relationship and we don't have the tools to engage with each other, we tend to kind of look elsewhere. So people do drastic things like have affairs or addictions that can be very damaging. But you have things that we call functional exits, normal everyday things that take us away from the relationship. It could be even parenting, friends, individual therapy, the gym, eating, shopping, Facebook. All of these things can be distractions that if we're using them to avoid our relationship, it becomes an exit. And what that does is it renders the relationship lifeless because you're poking holes in this area and there's no life force in the relationship. So when you seal the exits, you make a space so that the energy stays in between the two of you and you can really be there for each other. Now, once you've sealed your room and you're stuck together, so to speak, you want to make sure that space is clean. And that's step three, detox your marriage because when the space is toxic, you don't want to be in it. So that means, no shame, no blame, working on how using I statements, working on how you taking personal responsibility and ownership for your feelings, all of these things to talk to each other in a safe and connected way, which is devoid of all the negativity that usually plagues relationships. Then is as part of the detox your marriage, step four is acknowledge the other, and that's where we teach the Imago dialogue, where you learn how to acknowledge the other, both in sharing and listening. I acknowledge the other when I share. I realize that when I'm upset about something, it doesn't mean my spouse is available, that I might feel something, but they're not necessarily available to listen to me. So I need to acknowledge that I am in a relationship with someone else, and I need to see if they're available. Are you available to hear me? Are you available to talk right now? And then on the other hand, as a receiver, as a person who's listening, acknowledging the other, that making space for the other, entering the other person's world, instead of reacting when they share their feelings, instead of telling them why they're wrong, instead of offering them advice or minimizing the situation, just mirroring them, repeating back what they say, really making space for the other person. And what that does is you're both acknowledging that you are two unique people. You're not the same, you don't think the same, and you can make space for both of you. And then the final step, I mean, there's a lot more in my book and our online program about this, but this is just very briefly. The final step is called love infusions, and that's positive actions, sharing daily appreciations, um, going out together, spending quality time, doing nice things for each other, the positive things that love, even if your relationship seems negative, just sometimes you just have to overflow it with love, with positivity, with looking at your spouse in a nice way, with sharing appreciations and compliments, with going out and having fun together. Those things can do a lot to get rid of the negativity that plagues a relationship. So all of these steps together are very effective. Sometimes you might focus on sometimes you start with, it's very logical to go from commitment all the way up, but sometimes you can do them all simultaneously. Sometimes you might start with the love infusions, but by using these steps, I've seen couples really recover from the brink of disaster.
And this works for relationships as well, not just marriages,
Yeah,
right?
any relationship, it doesn't have to be a marriage. It's all about commitment. So, I mean, even a parent, eh, I'm only going to be a successful parent if I'm really committed. If I'm fighting the fact that I have to be a parent, and if I just don't want to do this, and I don't, then yeah, you're not going to be successful. I mean, you can't sever the bond, parent-child bond. I mean, you're always going to be a parent pretty much, but um, you're going to do a much better job if you're all in. So yeah, it applies to all relationships, but any other, any other like committed love relationship, even if you're not legally married.
So do these five things if you want to save your marriage. Be committed. Detoxify. Detoxify is the third one. Be committed. Close the exits, right?
Right, right.
Detoxify. Um,
Acknowledge the other.
Acknowledge and then love infusion.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So when couples come to you for help, according to your statistics, what do you think, what is usually the major cause of the problem?
The major cause, I mean, most people have communication challenges. Um, the major cause is, I mean, it's really just the traumatic childhood, even if you don't have a traumatic childhood, but the stress and anxiety of childhood, the stress and anxiety of being seen and what that does to your brain. And that is really at the root of everything. And it's just creating safety. Really, that's all it is. It's creating safety for the couple. And we do that through communicating because that's how we interact. You interact with another through communicating. So it's not that everybody has a communication problem, but it's more about that they just don't feel safe and their spouse triggers them. So we need to help them feel safe. And we do that through a structured process where they communicate with each other and help each other calm down and hear each other. And that deals with whatever the problem is, it's the same remedy.
Okay. So in your case now, your wife was unconsciously attracted to you because or as you mentioned, the major challenge was that she wasn't she's used to men or she's used her dad left, so she was thinking that you leave. So she was unconsciously attracted to you for that reason, right? So what would you say is the reason why you were unconsciously attracted to her?
Well, it wasn't exactly that. Actually, her mother left.
Oh, it was her mom, not her
Your
dad.
mother
Right.
left, but she saw
Assuming.
that like one of the going gets rough, you leave. But I would say like what were the issues that we had? I mean, we both were like I was looking for somebody. I was looking for somebody that let's see, what was the unconscious reason? I mean, I could give you like an example.
Mhm.
So when we were first married, we would have like our weekly meal on Friday night for our Sabbath, and I would sit at the table, and I was with my wife, and then she would just leave the table and go to the couch and fall asleep. And I was like really upset because I felt like she was ignoring me and not spending time with me, and she felt like when I asked her to come to the table, I was trying to control her. So she had this feeling of like she grew up in a home where like she felt like her parents were like or her father was like like the rigidity, but like she liked that about me when she met me. She liked the fact that I was very structured and organized and in my head a lot. And I liked the fact that she was like a free spirit. I like that her personality. But then when her free spirit was like she couldn't sit with me for more than a few minutes, then I didn't really like that free spirit anymore. I resented it. And vice versa. When I was this serious person, uh, and who wanted to have like interesting conversations, and then she resented that once she felt like I was like forcing her. So those are like, I mean, those are like two like little examples, but it shows kind of like we were attracted to like the different personality or like she had a very big personality, which I really liked. But then she got really scary when when she would get upset with me, and that was something I didn't want. So, that reminded me a little bit of my childhood, like when my mother would get upset, that would be scare me as a little child. But I almost was like looking for someone with that type of personality who was very expressive. So, there's a lot of different examples I could give, but those are like some of them.
And is this the case with everybody? Like, how much of your childhood affects your adult life? Is it the case with everybody, or is it just some set of people?
I believe that I believe it's the case with everybody. We can't not be affected by our past. And maybe it's not even, it could be childhood. It could be any traumatic experience that we had growing up. Any impactful experience is going to impact how we view the world, how we view ourselves, and what we're looking for in relationship to heal. So I do believe that we can't just assume like somebody just gets married when they're, let's say, 23 years old, and they like we just can't erase like the rest of their life and pretend that it didn't happen. It's just like they're starting from a clean slate. They have a certain personality that has built based on the way they've experienced life. And again, it's the way that they interpreted it. But that's what they've interpreted, that's what they've hardwired into their brain, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what they're going to recreate. So you see these situations, like it's very common that people, like, let's say they were um grew up in an abusive home and they seem to be attracted to an abusive spouse, and they get divorced, and then the next spouse is also abusive. It's like, why is that? Why do people just keep attracting the same thing into their life? Until we're aware of it and do the work, we're just going to keep attracting the same thing until we can get it right. So I do believe that if we're not conscious of it, for sure we're going to keep getting the same thing. And we can't just assume that that the past does not impact us. Some people it impacts more than others, but it's still going to impact us in my opinion, my experience working with people.
Hmm. So of all the couples that you've dealt with, which particular story has stayed with you the most, where you were like, I don't know, maybe a story that was a little bit more special, or that was a little bit more deep to you amongst all the couples that you've helped save their relationships?
Well, there's so many touching stories, and this is why it makes it so rewarding to do this work, because to sit with people's pain and to hear where they're coming from. I have to think about what I could share with you. What would be what would be something that's, extraordinary.
Take your time.
Yeah, I have to think. There's just so many stories, and it's been so many, I've been doing this for so long.
I can imagine.
Um, I remember one client where the wife felt like the husband was not being so honest with her. Basically, what happened, he said that he was going somewhere in the evenings, like to go to a class, and she would drive around the corner and see that he was at his mother's house. And she felt really kind of betrayed because he lied to her. And his mother was very important to him because he grew up really being raised by his mother. And his father was, out of the picture. His mother was a little bit, let's say like quirky. She spent a lot of time with their family, but the wife had a hard time with the mother-in-law. So she wasn't always like so thrilled that her husband was spending time with her. But he felt bad. He wanted to spend time with his mom, so he would kind of go around her back, so to speak, and do that. So, we see that he did that because he was afraid of her reaction. He wasn't trying to lie. He wasn't trying to be dishonest, but he he was afraid of her strong reaction. And it reminded him of course, his childhood with his mother, because he was afraid of his mother's strong reaction about certain things. So like the mother would say, like, did you do that? Did you put the green beans in the oven? And he would just say, oh, he would lie to her because he was afraid that she was going to yell at him. So he would just like kind of fudge the truth. And then so he wound up doing that again growing up. And on the other hand, this woman who was felt betrayed, she also had a similar experience growing up. Her parents were divorced, and she didn't see her father too much, but when she would see him, it was very exciting for her. And her father would often make promises and say, I'm going to spend time with you. I'm going to take you to get ice cream. And, you know, they'd have a date and he just wouldn't show up.
Wow.
She was used to like people not keeping their word. And
Mhm.
this was a childhood issue for her. He was afraid of people getting angry at him. So he would change his story to protect himself. And you see, like they wind up having their issues butt heads with each other. So, that's just like one little example of how this comes up all the time, how people have triggers in a relationship. They have explanations for both sides why they do what they do, and they're all both rooted in the opposite type of childhood experience. And when the couple can see that, and it's just like, oh wow, like now I see what's going on. So I see that there's like a greater picture here. There's a greater story here, an agenda. There's something that we can do to work on this.
Mm. Makes sense. Wow.
I could
Okay.
share another story if you want, now that I think
Okay.
of another one, if you'd
Yeah, but
like.
that makes total sense. I was
Other
just trying
people.
to think back in relations with my own life, you know. And I think I, I'm trying to think, you know. I feel like sometimes I would depends on who, what, and why though, but I feel like sometimes I would reduce the truth. I wouldn't necessarily lie, but I would maybe not give the whole story just because I didn't want to be perceived as a certain way, because like I feel like growing up, there was this, I was kind of like I was a responsible child, right? So every time that I did something wrong, people were usually so disappointed. And that was so much for me because it didn't give me room to be a child. So now growing up, I feel like if I feel like the truth will make people be disappointed, I would maybe twist and move around it a little bit and
Hmm.
not maybe give the whole or paint the whole picture. So that makes sense. If you have another interesting story to share, I'm excited to listen to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're saying that you had, because there was so much pressure and expectation of you to be responsible, that if when someone does that now, you didn't want people to be disappointed with you. So it sounds like even now, if that case is similar
If I
and
feel
someone would be
yeah, but I'm
disappointed.
I'm slowly learning though to just not care, to just be
Yeah,
be as authentic as possible because quite frankly, that load is not mine to carry. You know,
yeah.
yeah, I feel like I'm mostly responsible by nature, but every now and then I would be human and people would be so shocked. You would see like other people do the things that I would do and they would be awarded grace. But if I did it, it was catastrophic because
Mhm.
nobody expected it from me. And that wasn't fair. That wasn't so fair on me growing up.
Yeah, I found like there was like a double standard for you.
Yes. Yes. And I
That's,
thought for the longest time it was my fault. But I'm in a better place now, I think.
that's
I
great.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I haven't asked you today?
I mean, no, you asked a lot of good questions.
Thank you. So I asked everything. So what is the one thing that you wish every couple knew?
I wish every couple would know that relationships are supposed to have challenges and that the challenges are for the purpose of growth and healing. That so many people think, well, okay, it doesn't feel good anymore. I think I made the wrong choice. This was a mistake. It's my partner's fault. I should leave. Someone else will be better. To realize that you're actually in the right relationship. If you chose this partner, if you fell in love with them, if you committed to them, you're probably in the right relationship. You just need to understand why you're being upset. And when you understand where it's coming from, you realize when you get conscious, you realize that you're actually in the right relationship. That was a big aha moment for us when we realized that the problems we were having were like it was like a puzzle piece. Like we could see exactly where it was coming from in our childhood and why we picked this person. Then it gave us the belief that we were in the right relationship and we just needed to do the work to become the right spouse.
Yeah, there've been cases I feel like there've been genuine cases where people actually got married to the wrong people, or they probably got married for the wrong reasons, e.g. societal pressure and all that stuff. So in cases like that, can you say that they actually made mistakes, or it's still a subconscious choosing of your childhood, I don't know, your
Yeah,
childhood
childhood, like
efficiency? Yeah.
friend. Yeah. Well, I mean, for the most part, I mean, there are people that are there are places people that are pressured into a relationship. But I think for the most part, if somebody again, if somebody has a romantic love and falls in love with someone and chooses their partner, then you can bet almost 100%, 99.99% that there's going to be some childhood thing there. Um, in terms of situations where people are forced, it depends on the type of community. There are arranged marriages. Even in those cases, I've seen people, turns out that they have they, their childhood issues come up in their relationship. But it's definitely a lot harder for those situations. And it's harder because they don't have that strong buy-in. When you feel like you fell in love with somebody and you connected with them at one point, it's a lot easier to do the work. But if you never really liked them so much in the first place, it is definitely harder to be committed. I believe that if there is commitment, people can work on things and they can have a happy life. But it's definitely hard if there's really no attraction at all. That definitely makes it harder and um, in such a scenario.
Yeah. Well, personally, I believe that great relationships are the heart of the society. So you definitely do rewarding work. Well done. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, book your services, how do we go about it?
Sure. My website is www.themarriagerestorationproject.com, themarriagerestorationproject.com. And you can visit our website. We have a 60-second plan to a happy and healthy marriage. You can get some quick tips there and learn more about we do intensive retreats with couples, and we also have an online DIY course that you can do on your own or with your spouse at the comfort of your own home, and a lot of other resources. So we're happy to help you.
Mhm. Thank you so much. This has been a very exciting conversation, and I hope that it helps the people that it's supposed to help. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, and that's going to be the end of this conversation.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.